Kieran never expected his life to take a wild turn when he met Sayari, a stunning alien woman with obsidian-black skin that shimmered under the neon lights of New Tokyo. She wasn't human, but her presence was intoxicating. Her golden irises glowed with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. Humans and Zelvarians rarely mixed beyond business and diplomacy. Their species were far more advanced, ruling half the galaxy, while humans were the newcomers trying to prove themselves. Yet that night, logic had no place between them. They met in a high-rise lounge overlooking the cityscape. Sayari's voice was like silk laced with hidden fire. "You're different from the others, Kieran," she murmured, watching him with a predator's patience. He smirked. "And you're dangerous." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "Perhaps. Are you afraid?" He wasn't. A shared drink led to whispered confessions. Their chemistry crackled like a live wire. When she pulled him into her embrace, her touch was electric, her lips warm and demanding. That night they shattered every rule. The next morning, Sayari was gone. Kieran convinced himself it was just a fleeting encounter. A moment of madness. He'd move on. But fate had other plans. 3 months later, Kieran's normal life came to a crashing halt. The sky above New Tokyo darkened as a Zelvarian royal cruiser descended. The streets fell silent. Their kind rarely made public appearances. The air vibrated with unseen energy as the ship's ramp extended. And then she appeared. Sayari. But something was different. She was clad in ceremonial robes, her presence commanding. She stepped forward, scanning the crowd until her golden gaze locked onto Kieran. Then, in a voice that echoed through the entire square, she declared, "Kieran of Earth, you carry my child. By the laws of my people, you are bound to me for eternity." The world around him blurred. His breath caught. Did she just say? Gasps and whispers filled the crowd. The Zelvarians had strict customs. Their species rarely made it outside their own, and when they did, it was a lifelong bond. A sacred, unchangeable contract. Kieran's mind raced. This couldn't be real. But then Sayari descended the ramp and stood before him, her expression softer than before. A hint of something vulnerable in her eyes. "I didn't plan for this, Kieran," she said, voice quieter now. "But the moment I knew, I had no choice but to find you." His heart pounded. "You're telling me I'm—" "Yes." Her fingers brushed his wrist. "And according to my people's law, you're mine now." Kieran found himself aboard Sayari's vessel, surrounded by Zelvarian officials. The walls of the chamber pulsed with a faint blue glow, the air thick with an unfamiliar scent, something sharp, almost electric. He stood in the center, eyes darting between the tall, imposing figures that loomed around him. Their expressions were unreadable, but their judgment was clear. Sayari sat on an ornate, throne-like chair, her posture rigid, her golden eyes locked on him. It was strange. Just months ago, they had been nothing more than two strangers lost in the night. Now, he was being claimed by her people. One of the elders stepped forward. His skin was the same deep black as Sayari's, his long silver robes sweeping the floor as he spoke. "Our species does not produce offspring easily," he said, his voice deep and measured. "This child is a miracle, and by our customs, its parents are forever bound." Kieran exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "So, what? I don't get a choice in this." The elder's gaze was cold. "The bond is already formed. You and Sayari are one." Kieran turned to her. "And what do you think?" His voice was quieter now, less sharp. Sayari hesitated for a fraction of a second before she spoke. "It is our way." He searched her face. There was something beneath her regal exterior, something uncertain. She wasn't just doing this because of duty. There was more to it. That night, as the ship soared through the endless expanse of space, Kieran found himself staring out at the stars. The weight of it all pressed down on him. A child. A bond that could never be undone. A life he hadn't chosen. But then, Sayari's voice broke the silence. "I didn't expect this either," she admitted, standing beside him. Kieran turned, studying her. She looked less like the untouchable alien queen and more like the woman he had met that night, raw, real. "So what happens now?" he asked. She reached out, her fingers barely brushing against his. "We figure it out. Together." He looked at her, at the vulnerability in her eyes. And for the first time since this all began, he wasn't sure if he wanted to fight it. Days turned into weeks aboard Sayari's vessel. At first, Kieran felt like an outsider, a human caught in an alien world he didn't understand. Zelvarians were advanced, their technology seamless, their customs strict. But as time passed, he realized something. Sayari had not brought him here as a prisoner. She had brought him here as her mate. The others treated him with reverence, not hostility. He was the first human to ever be bonded to a Zelvarian, and that meant something. He was no longer just Kieran of Earth. He was Kieran, mate to Sayari, father of the child that would change history. One evening, he found Sayari standing alone in the garden chamber. The room was filled with strange, bioluminescent flowers that pulsed softly in the dim light. She stood in silence, hands resting on her stomach, lost in thought. Kieran approached her carefully. "Are you okay?" She turned to him, her golden eyes searching his face. "I never planned for this," she admitted. "Our people, we don't love the way humans do. Mating is chosen for us, dictated by genetics, logic." Kieran exhaled. "But that's not what happened with us." "No," her voice was barely a whisper. "With you it was chaos. Fire. Something I could never control." A slow warmth spread through his chest. This bond, it wasn't just obligation for her. It was something deeper. He hesitated before stepping closer. "And if I said I don't want this just because of the child?" Her breath caught. "If I said I want you?" Sayari's fingers trembled as she reached for him, her touch hesitant at first. Then, she pulled him close, pressing her forehead against his in the way of her people. "I would say you are already mine," she whispered. Kieran let out a breathless laugh, wrapping his arms around her. "Then I guess I'm the luckiest human in the universe." And as her lips met his, soft and sure, he knew, this was no accident. No mistake. They were bound by fate. For eternity.